This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. Today we are just doing news, but it's not just, because there's lots of news. And some of it's good, and some of it we don't know. So let's start with the one that, we're always trying to track what is going on with Paramount Plus and Paramount Global and mergers and schmergers. And so this information came in that Paramount Global and Comcast have been talking, and one of the ideas that came up was it would involve combining Peacock and Paramount Plus into one streamer, which is what's happening in Europe already. That's like Sky Showtime is basically.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would be. I mean, it shows that they have a relationship.
Right.
Sky Showtime isn't as if you added them together. It's as if you added half of each.
Right.
So, for example, they don't have all the Star Trek shows. They have half of them.
Oh.
So in fact, not even that. They have Strange New Worlds and Prodigy. The idea, I think, would be more like gluing the two together. But I imagine that it wouldn't be 100% of what's on both. But they wouldn't want to lose too much, because the goal is to take the scale of the two of them and make them competitive with the Hulu Disney Plus bundle and with Netflix and Prime, and get them into the top tier.
They would need to do something drastic like that to get there, because they just don't have the same offerings. I mean, Paramount Plus in particular. Like, I actually watch a lot of Peacock.
Peacock's having a bit of a moment. A lot of that was driven by the fact that they put an NFL playoff game exclusively onto Peacock, which pissed off a lot of people, but resulted in their biggest month ever in January. Yeah, the Seth MacFarlane TED show did really well for them.
They just got Oppenheimer, and I think that jacked up their traffic quite a bit.
They don't really have any marquee original shows. One of their best shows is, ironically, Yellowstone, because before the Paramount re-merger with CBS, the old Viacom cut a deal with NBC Universal, so Paramount has launched like 3 or 4 Yellowstone spin-offs on Paramount Plus, but the OG show is on Peacock. And I know that they regret that deeply.
Right.
Every day.
Right. Well, because that's their biggest show.
Yeah, Yellowstone is a huge show. And the whole Taylor Sheridan universe. They announce a new Taylor Sheridan produced show every week, practically.
Right. Right. With some huge star, with some huge movie star attached to it.
Always.
Yeah. Well, but let's talk about how this could affect Star Trek theoretically.
Well, first of all, let me say this isn't happening. This is something they've discussed. There is some cynicism with some analysts out there who are saying it's interesting how this was leaked to Bloomberg, even though it was then confirmed by everyone, like a day after some bad news came out about Paramount, because one of their largest shareholders, Warren Buffett, it was revealed, sold off a significant part of his Paramount Global holdings. When Warren Buffett does something, the market pays attention.
Right.
I don't think this is an alternative to a merger. I still think a merger or a buyout's going to happen. But in some ways, this could make that easier. So let's say they're participating in this joint venture. Then if someone like Skydance buys them, it somewhat makes things easier. They don't need to just, destroy Paramount Plus. They just continue to participate in this joint venture. There's a question of, do they invest more money in it? And, because this thing would have to show a profit pretty quickly, though, which means they'd have to cut a lot of costs, which you would do if you combine services. So I think it's potentially a good thing for Star Trek, but I still feel like the way things are going with streaming, that the trajectory is that Paramount in general will be spending less and less on Star Trek in the coming years than they have in the last few years.
Well, because they've been spending a lot. They've had a lot of stuff going at the same time.
Right. I mean, they are currently producing 2 live action shows, a live action movie, and an animated cartoon as we speak.
Well, they're not quite producing the live action movie.
Well, the Section 31 movie.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like the movie.
No. I'm talking Paramount Plus, not okay. That's a whole other story. So that's a lot of money. The big question is, what do they do in 2025? Do they roll into another live action movie? Like maybe that's how legacy, happens, or do they just not, and they're down to like one live action TV show and maybe not even an animated show anymore.
Well, don't forget the Starfleet Academy show too.
Right. So that would be 2 live action TV shows.
Right.
That might be enough for them. So, Paramount Plus needs a lifeline, and this would be it.
I mean, honestly, the idea of Star Trek being in places that people go, as cruel as that sounds, would be great. Like the reason I subscribe to Paramount Plus is mostly for all the Star Trek. Occasionally there's something else. They do have some other stuff, but if I was pruning and they didn't have Star Trek, they would get pruned. Yeah. So the idea of Star Trek being in a place like Peacock where people are there to watch, Peacock has everyone who wants to watch The Office and Parks and Rec for starters.
This isn't, I think some people, this wouldn't be Peacock. This would be something new. In fact, there's a lot of jokes about what people would call it, and I'm not going to repeat some of those, but you could imagine Paramount, well, Anson Mount actually, which one did he endorse? Can we say, I think he endorsed MountCock. Or the other way around. Anyway, but it would be a joint venture, likely 50-50. So this isn't Peacock taking over Paramount Plus.
No, I know. I'm just talking about what would be I'm talking about if you want to. I would like the idea of putting Star Trek somewhere that has other stuff that people want to see.
Well, a lot of this is being driven by sports, believe it or not. Recently, there was an announcement that Disney and Fox and Warner Discovery were going to form a new streaming sports venture, which people are calling Spoolu for Sports Hulu. The 2 companies that aren't part of that are NBC Universal and Paramount Global, who have significant sports rights assets, including the NFL. And so that would be a big driver for this joint venture if this were to happen.
The
irony is this would be a lot like after Netflix launched, the first things all the studios did and networks did is let's create something together, which was Hulu, a joint venture where they started dumping all their reruns. But CBS didn't want to be part of it, which is why they launched CBS All Access. And the first thing they decided to put on it was Star Trek, which ended up not to be the first show. But the plan was for it to be the first original show. So everything's kind of going back to that again. This would be similar in that it would be jointly owned by 2 corporations.
I mean, I do think we're at an interesting is a nice word for it, point in the streaming industry, because they're reevaluating a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, and it's more than streaming, it's all TV. The guy who coined the phrase peak TV recently said peak TV is over. And you're reading all these articles in the trades about how actors are having trouble finding work. There's just literally less work out there because there's less shows. There's less scripted TV happening. Even after the strikes and people had a chance to go back, we're just not getting to pre-strike levels of scripted TV.
It's fewer shows, fewer seasons, shorter seasons.
Yeah, across the board.
That's making it hard for a lot of people to make a living. Actors, writers in particular, I think, have been hit pretty hard by this. So it's not, you can't really make a living. You kind of need a side hustle.
So Star Trek is just one of many things that are being caught up in that wave. Another wave that is happening is a move back towards licensing. And I may be writing something up on this. So I think we could also see, even if this joint venture happens, it could be they decide this new thing, Paramount / Peacock or whatever they call it,
MountCock,
is not the. Well, I mean, Paramount Plus already isn't the home of Star Trek anymore because
the movies are over at Max.
Well, yeah, and Prodigy's over at Netflix.
Right.
So, but they could. I think almost certainly we could see them license the library of classic Trek again to Netflix and others, but maybe new original shows on Netflix or Prime.
Oh, so
no, not MountCock.
I'm just looking for reasons to say MountCock. That's the only reason I said it.
God.
Go Anson.
he would be the spokesperson, perhaps, for this.
Yes, he'd be in all those ads on the mountain.
Yeah, but no, he'd have to like dress up in a peacock suit or something.
And climb the mountain in the peacock suit.
Okay. So that's, so what is the net result of this? We don't know. We don't know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Something's happening. All we know is something's happening.
Well, here's something else that's happening. Do you like my segue?
Okay.
Star Trek Discovery has a premiere date.
Oh my God. A real one.
Season 5. A real one.
Not just a month, but a day.
An actual plan. So on April 4th, we are going to get 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, and then we'll get 1 a week until it's done.
I wonder if that's the new thing, because didn't they do 2 Lower Decks on day 1 for the most recent season?
I think so.
Yeah, maybe this is the new thing they're doing.
To make it feel eventy.
It's a highly serialized show in general. I'm curious if these fit together like a 2-parter, or whether they're just doing 2 to make it a bigger event.
Right.
In March, we now know that on March 12th is actually the world premiere at South by Southwest, and they're only going to show the first one.
Right.
And you need to buy a $1,400 ticket to watch it.
Yeah, I can't do that. I won't be doing that.
We're sending someone. We didn't have to spend that much because we got a press pass, but we will be there. If they do red carpet, or I think they're going to do some stuff there. So,
well, yeah, because there's a panel with Alex Kurtzman, Michelle Paradise, Sonequa, Doug, Wilson, Mary, David Ajala, hello, and Blue Del Barrio.
And that will be, what will be interesting is that's the day after the screening. So the audience will have seen the episode, but the world won't. So will they talk at the panel about the thing that everyone in the audience has seen, but no one else has seen? Right. So that'll be
interesting. But
whatever it is, we will be reporting on it.
Yeah. And we'll have press around then too, because they're setting up press interviews right before that you and I are going to be doing.
It's junket time.
It's disco time, baby. I'm excited. I'm very excited for the new season.
We should get our All Access Star Trek loyal listeners and readers involved. Maybe people can go to the articles on our site and suggest questions for, the whole cast and probably Michelle Paradise. So if you have questions, throw them in the comment section.
Yeah, I think Alex is there too. It is the whole cast. So yeah, on this post, do it on the post for this podcast. Put questions.
Be realistic, though. There's certain things that Alex Kurtzman and Michelle Paradise are just not going to answer. So right. think about what they might answer.
Think about when they say, okay, you have 10 minutes, but you're sharing your 10 minutes with 6 other people.
Yeah. There's no guarantee we're going to answer any of these questions, any of these questions. No offense. But I'm curious what people are interested in, and I'm sure it'll inform, the questions that we get in there.
Yeah.
And Joe could have some red carpet opportunities in Texas. So these can inform that as well.
True. All right, cool. Well, so we know a few things about it. It's interesting. Sonequa has been, whenever she shows up for anything, people ask her about Star Trek. And she has been talking about, she did reiterate, it's a much more fun season. It's a new tone this season. And then someone asked her, are we going to see familiar faces beyond the Discovery crew? And she said, and I quote, "Oh, that's a nice question. I hope those chances are good."
But if you watch it on video, it's like wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah,
so
that was my point. So we're going to see someone I don't know who it's going to. It could be someone from within Star Trek. It could be some stunt casting like they did with Stacey Abrams. We don't know.
She did say in a different interview that Stacey Abrams is not coming back.
Right.
I think when familiar face, it could be anything, but I assume that means a familiar Star Trek face. And there's 2 categories of those. That's disco people that we haven't seen in a while. So Michelle Yeoh, Jason Isaacs, that kind of thing. Mary Chieffo.
Which is tricky given the time jump.
Yeah, but it's Star Trek.
Flashback, whatever.
And the other is crossover stuff.
Right.
Patrick Stewart, even Anson Mount, who has been on the show before. Jonathan Frakes, it's not a season finale if Jonathan Frakes doesn't show up, right?
It's not a Star Trek show if Jonathan Frakes doesn't show up.
I'm thinking it's one of those, actually. I'm thinking they dip into the pool of legacy Star Trek and grab someone.
I don't think it's going to happen, but I'd love to see Jason Isaacs.
Yeah, the Prime Lorca thing, that would be great. And we know that, he desperately wants it to happen. They're in the wrong century for that, but it's Star Trek, so who knows?
There's always a way, and it could be the Prime one, the evil one, flashback, retelling, memory, whatever. Do it.
Bob Picardo. I'm going to put that one out there.
Well, it could be. I mean, he's on Prodigy, so that takes some of the novelty out of it.
Which will we see first, though, is the big question mark.
Yeah, we still don't know when Prodigy's coming.
Yeah, we know that it's not coming in March, because they've announced what's coming in March.
It'll be great if they premiere on the same day. Not. Anyway, more about Discovery. So Sonequa also talked about the filming the finale, the epilogue. She called it an addendum shoot. And she said we had very limited time and limited pages to do it, but that it really did work and feels like a series finale. And it was, I think emotional for them filming those final scenes, knowing that was it.
I mean, my bet is, they had limited time, limited money. There's probably no plot to it. It's probably just a bunch of people sitting around in a room talking about the good old days or something like that.
Maybe with old age makeup on.
Yeah. Like they jump forward a few years. Saru is, he's got him and his Vulcan girlfriend are married and have little funny looking kids.
Interesting looking children. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that. That could be fun. Who knows? It's still nice that they did it. So we'll see.
Yeah. She said the same thing that Doug said, which was like there could definitely be crossovers on the Starfleet Academy show, that any of them could do it. She said, I don't think any of us would say no.
Could be that show, could be any show. But she wants to do it, and she thinks they all would love to have a chance to show up in more Star Trek. I think, which is reasonable. That makes sense.
Yep.
These are little tiny breadcrumbs. But I'm still looking forward to the season, mostly because of the tonal shift. It's going to be more episodic. In theory, sounds like more fun.
Yeah, last season was a little heavy, a little slow.
Yeah, I still liked a lot of elements. They dragged it out a bit too much.
I liked a lot of it, but they did. It could have been fewer episodes and it would have been tighter and better. But I am excited about the final season. Let's
talk a little bit about Star Trek Picard, which is obviously over. But
obviously.
But it continues to get accolades. In our last podcast, we were talking about how it's, kind of swept the Saturn Awards. And so this week it was announced that Terry Matalas was nominated for a WGA award for his script for the season and series finale. That's kind of a big deal. I mean, this is the 5th episode in franchise history to get a WGA nomination.
Which is a bit of a crime. But it's great. I mean, I'm so happy for Terry. I think it's great.
I mean, I would argue that episode 4 was the better episode. I think a lot of us thought that when we did our roundup.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
But the finale had more nostalgia in it and more special effects. So maybe that's why that one got a little more attention.
Well, the special effects wouldn't help much with the Writers Guild.
I mean, I assume when they're assessing something, they assess the final work as opposed to the script.
Yes.
But I don't know.
But I assume writers vote on this. So writers are looking at it.
Yeah, this is all writers.
It's going to be about writing. Yeah. He's up against some big shows too.
Yeah, and famous, major writer Shonda Rhimes.
Yeah. She's no slouch. She's probably writing 5 new shows right now while we're recording this podcast.
Exactly. I joked. I sent Terry a congratulations. I'm like, you're in there with Shonda Rhimes. I said, where's your $100 million Netflix deal now? Because he's like, well, I wish. So, yeah, good. It's good company. He's very proud of it. He sent out a tweet about it, just showing who he's nominated with, because it's a big deal. And this is his first time. He's been in the business for a long time. This is his first WGA nomination.
And being nominated specifically by your peers, like that's what matters. I think it's great. I'm really happy for him, and I'll be rooting for him. And then Patrick Stewart was nominated for something. Not nominated. He is going to receive an award I'd never heard of. But it's the Television Showperson of the Year award. From it's like a publicist guild, the International Cinematographers and Publicists Guild.
Yeah, this is just a weird Hollywood thing, but a few years ago there was a Hollywood Publicist Guild and there was a cinematographer guild, and for whatever reason, and there's no logic to it, they merged.
Okay.
So now it's a guild of publicists and cinematographers, and they each have their own award show. So there's the Publicists Award Show and the Cinematographers Award Show. They do a special award at the Publicists Guild, and Patrick Stewart's getting it, and they cite his return in Picard and his years, because this is about TV, and his years on Next Generation. He's done a few other TV shows, which most people don't remember, to be perfectly honest, but he's actually done quite a few, even going back before Star Trek. PBS fans remember him.
He did I, Claudius and whatever. Yeah. And then after that, he did Blunt Talk. Lots of different things. No, and there's some previous winners. It's a pretty good list. Like people like Norman Lear, our friend Shonda Rhimes again. Stephen Bochco, like Quinta Brunson, who I love. Lots of big names there.
Bob Hope, for God's sakes.
Aaron Spelling, for God's sakes.
Pretty cool for Patrick. He's just coming off winning, the Saturn Award himself. So Picard is getting a lot of recognition from Hollywood.
Yeah, no, it's good. The more mainstream Star Trek gets, the better it is for the rest of us.
Yeah. Now, there is still zero indication that Paramount has said, "Oh, good for you. Let's do another show." That is just not happening. Could happen. Might happen.
I was going to say, not yet.
I still believe that there isn't a plan per se, but there's kind of a penciled in plan that when they're done with what they're doing now, they would pivot back to that. Probably as a TV movie backdoor pilot.
That makes the most sense. That would be the smart way to do it.
After the Section 31 movie, and I don't mean like right after, I mean like a year after. But, is Terry going to be available? Are the actors going to be available? So there's, the planets need to align to make this happen.
But they could. Everybody's pretty interested in doing it, so that helps a lot.
But there is not a secret they're doing it and they're not telling us thing happening,
No, there's not.
And there isn't they haven't told Terry it's happening, but it is happening thing, which I've seen people think is true, and it's not. It's not happening, but it could. Anyway.
But it might. And we want it to, but we don't know. All right, well, let's move on to another show. How about Lower Decks? How about a little Lower Decks talk?
Yeah, there's a couple of Mike McMahon did an interview with Trek Culture. Tawny Newsome appeared at what's it called?
Was it Farpoint?
Farpoint, sorry. Both of them teased cameos for this season 5, which is currently underway. I guess today there was a post from one of the artists saying that he had his last meeting on
Yep, Phil Murphy, right?
Yeah. Whatever he does before the animators do their thing. So I guess, it's in the hands of the animators at this point.
Right.
Tawny said they finished doing voice work already a few weeks ago. So it's coming this year. They're working on it. We think it's coming this year. But what Mike's implied is that these are more deep cut cameos. So more along the lines of Cito in the season finale.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. That's what I want, is the fun, obscure ones, guest stars, stuff like that. So he said it involved him writing personal letters and calling in favors.
Right, which probably means people like her who aren't even acting anymore, maybe.
Right.
And Tawny was asked, is there someone you really want to work with? Remember, Tawny's a super fan herself. And she said, well, someone like that is in season 5.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, if you were, who's a character you want to see show up in Lower Decks, a deep cut character?
Well, I don't know how deep, it's not so deep cutty. I was thinking more along the lines of who Tawny might be excited about.
I'd like to see Dr. Pulaski. I think there'd be great fun you could have with her. Barkley.
Oh, I don't want Barkley. I'm good without Barkley.
Okay.
There are ones I want follow-ups. I always hold out hope that we'll hear from Marasta Yale again one day.
It's not going to be Terry Farrell Dax, because Tawny talked about how much she wants to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be Avery Brooks, Cisco, because she called that her holy grail, which, she hopes will happen someday.
But maybe it's like Garrick or something.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That would be really fun.
They talked about how the season's crazy. Mike said something interesting. He talked about how they've changed the format of the show again. It sounds like there's kind of barely a major season arc at all. Good. So it's good they're changing things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Keep us on our toes, as it were.
Yeah.
Did he say there's not a season big bad?
Yeah, that's what he said. No season long big bad.
We don't have a lot on Strange New Worlds, which is happening now. But we do have an article up on the site with just some, images from the set. Christina Chong posted a picture of her dog on the set, that kind of stuff. So it looks like they are, in fact, by now, they're probably done with episode 4, which was directed by Frakes.
Yep.
So they're almost halfway done shooting the season, but we still don't know when it's coming. We haven't heard anything from Section 31 shoot, which is happening now, wraps up sometime in March. We're getting tiny bits from the set of Strange New World. We're getting nothing from the set. I'm sure that all the new actors have been read. You do not post anything on social.
Right.
You do not. If someone says the word Star Trek to you, you just pretend you've never heard it.
Right. I don't know what that is.
Exactly.
I'm not programmed to respond in that area.
Yeah. So this one's really locked down. Whereas they're not doing that. Like with Strange New Worlds, there's, the people.
Well, because we know what the sets and the characters look like. Do you know what I've been doing with Strange New Worlds? I decided to try an experiment. So I decided I'm going to rewatch it from the beginning, and I'm just going to pretend that it's a completely alternate timeline and has no connection to canon. Because that's, I'm trying to figure out, is that when I start to get just annoyed? Because I have such a love-hate relationship with it. I love some of it, and then I get so frustrated. So I'm watching from the beginning, and I got up to the body switch episode. And I have to say, first of all, it's a lot more enjoyable when you just decide it's a whole different take on all the characters.
So it's like the Kelvin movies.
It's like the Kelvin movies. Yes, that's how I'm doing it. So it's definitely more fun. It's still, like the body swap one still kind of didn't quite work for me in certain ways, but it's working better and I'm enjoying it more when I can let go of those things, especially, my big antagonist, the Gorn. It's just a new species. It's just new.
There is a fan theory I've seen out there that there is no prime timeline. Ever since the first TOS time travel episode, they started branching timelines. There's dozens of them now, essentially.
Right. But we've always had this idea that original series up through Enterprise was all the same.
Yeah, I mean, which is the company line. There is a prime timeline,
right? And
there's the Kelvin timeline, which has a distinct beginning, hence the name.
So that's doing Strange New Worlds as just completely different. I'm enjoying it more because of that. Because everybody's new. I'm not looking at who Chapel used to be or who Spock turns into. I'm just watching it as if they're new characters. And Vulcans too. Like, Vulcans act like this. And it definitely helps and makes it more fun.
Well, I recommend that then for people who are, struggle with that. Yeah. I always say if you watch the show purely through canon goggles, you could miss the fun. Not that it's not important to acknowledge canon, but if you view it through that lens, it could stop you at some point and you might miss some fun just because your brain is thinking, wait, but how does that work with this episode? Blah, blah, blah.
Right. So I'm not getting tripped up with stuff, which is great, but it's something you've always said, which is this show as a binge because of the tones shifting. Like you watch Memento Mori and then it's the body switch. It's just like, whoa, like these people have just been through this horrible thing. And now the so it is funny to binge it that way.
I mean, it's okay to watch like one a day maybe as a binge, but definitely not back to back.
No, I've been doing like 2 or 3 at a time.
Oh no, that's I do not recommend that. That's
it's been an interesting experiment.
It's interesting. I should try that maybe. So I think it's at best 50-50 that we see some Strange New Worlds this year, but we are going to get a Strange New Worlds novel, which are at least canon adjacent. I mean, they've been very good with the new novels and stuff to try to make them appear as if they are canon.
They tend to fill in gaps.
I mean, the line is they're canon until,
They're
otherwise. Right. So, and this one is going to tell a modern Strange New World story. We don't know when it's set, like if it's set between seasons 1 or 2, whatever, but it'll be on the Enterprise, but then it'll be bouncing back to the origins of Pike and Una meeting at the Academy. So we're going to learn all about how they form their bond and all that kind of stuff.
And it's written by Una McCormack.
So it's Una writing about Una.
I know. She must have been so excited to get that one.
She's obviously written many Star Trek things, but this will be her first Strange New Worlds thing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I like her writing. She did a Picard one that really filled in a lot of missing information.
And that's coming in September?
September 24th.
It's called, Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, Asylum.
Lots
period.
of colons.
We have a better idea of some more Star Trek stuff coming in the back half of the year.
There's a lot of stuff coming.
Specifically from Simon & Schuster. There's No Man's Land. We interviewed Mike and Kirsten about that on the audio thing. They're turning that into a novel that comes out in November.
Well, there's also, there's Dayton Ward has one called Pliable Truths coming out in May. That's about the end of the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. Takes place before Deep Space Nine, the show. And Rolarin is in it. I saw him talking about that a little bit at Virtual TrekCon, which I'm going to talk about later.
We now have the cover for that, so that's in the article, which has Garrick on it. I love Garrick, so it sounds like he's a major character in there as well.
And then Greg Cox has one called Lost to Eternity coming out in July. That has Savick and Gillian Taylor in it. Takes place in the original series movie era.
It takes place in multiple eras, but a lot of it is in the right before Star Trek 6. So kind of the end of the movie era.
Right.
And picks up on what happened with Savick and what happened with Dr. Gillian Taylor, which would be cool.
All right. And David Mack has Star Trek Picard, Picard, Firewall coming out next week. And that one is about 7 between Voyager's arrival back home and the events of Star Trek Picard. And you can get basically everything's available on pre-order, including Nana Visitor's book that we've been waiting for so long, called Star Trek, open a channel, a woman's trek. Lots of colons. But that's coming out in October. I've been waiting so long to read this. We're going to be talking to her. I'm excited.
Right. That got swept up in the Eagle Moss kerfuffle.
Right.
It's now being published by Insight Editions, but distributed by Simon & Schuster. We'll have more on that, and hopefully you get a chance to interview her again about that in the coming weeks.
I can't wait. I love her.
So it's a good year there is a Titan book coming out soon, which is from the Art of Picard. We should have a preview of that hopefully soon, and we'll have reviews of all of these things up as well when they come out. We just did a preview for a separate thing, a special one-off comic book from IDW, which arrives at the end of May, just in time for Pride Month. And it will be celebrating all the LGBTQIA characters, or not all of them, but many of them from the Star Trek franchise.
It's called Star Trek, Celebration. It arrives May 29th. So it's got a cover with a lot of characters on it. So I have seen people already complaining about who's missing, but that's when you post anything about Star Trek, somebody always points out something that's missing. But it's a big group.
Right. I think some people are like, where's Jadzia?
Right.
Terry's described her as pansexual.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I do think, if they were doing that character now where Jadzia did talk about, having been a man and having been a woman, but I feel like that's something they could explore even more in a current series. Those conversations would be a little deeper.
Indeed.
All right, well, let's leave the pages of books and comics and jump onto a ship. Because the Star Trek cruise is underway. So, Aaron, Aaron Bossig from Trek Movie, is on the ship. Well, it left port. By the time you're hearing this, if you hear this the day the podcast comes out, then it left port yesterday. They have so many people on this ship. It's unbelievable. Sonequa Martin Green is the official cruise captain. They have theme nights and excursions and events with the stars and shows and costume contests and all this stuff. But it's like Todd Stashwick and Walter Koenig and people from Enterprise and Next Gen and Deep Space Nine and Discovery and Picard, Lower Decks.
It's everyone but Strange New Worlds, really, because they can't have people from Strange New Worlds because they're
and Prodigy, right? Well, no, I mean Robert Picardo's there; he counts. It's a ton of people,
but it's more than just like a floating convention. With
no,
panels.
You actually get to spend time with them. Like people tell stories. Oh, I did karaoke with Nana, and I'm on the dance floor with this person, and people do like their own little sort of classes and workshops, and you do yoga with Terry Farrell, and like all these different things.
Yeah, so we will be covering the cruise as it goes along. If like at a convention, because they do have panel discussions. Sonequa says something about season 5. We'll be reporting on that, but also just, cruise life and that. So just keep your eyes on our social media. We've already started posting a few things on social media from the ship. There is Wi-Fi while they're out on the ocean. We'll see how well that works. So keep an eye on our threads and Twitter for updates and on the site for articles coming from Aaron.
Yep. Looks like fun too.
Before we wrap up, our last week, it was all Saturn interviews. There is actually more to it. In the last few days, there's like a dozen articles that came out of that. Stuff that wasn't in our, we didn't listen to in our last podcast is up on the site now in transcripts. Things like Marina Sirtis and Michael Dorn talking about Gene Roddenberry. And there's a lot of fun stuff that didn't make the cut last week for audio or last episode. But it's worth checking out all of those articles. And I guess that's it. Is that it? That's it for the week, I guess.
Yeah, well, let's do our bits of the week.
Mine, I'm going to get a little political. I mean, now you don't get political, but I am kind of a political person. There is a site I like called The Bulwark, but they did an article on Star Trek, which I thought was really interesting, and it's called "Are We All Too Cynical for Star Trek?" And the tagline is, "The franchise evolution since the 60s reflects disconcerting trends in American society." Basically, the premise is, if you look at old Star Trek, there's this trust in institutions embedded in the show, a lot of it. Starfleet, the Federation, which certainly from the 60s, especially the early 60s, there's a lot of this is pre-Vietnam, even though Vietnam was happening pre-Watergate, but even in the Next Gen, there is this trust in Starfleet for the most part. And when you look at modern Trek, so our heroes are always heroes, but in the newer shows, often Starfleet is the villain. Where the villain is, the call is coming from inside the house, basically.
Yeah. Well said.
It's a really interesting analysis. It's worth reading because it's both a sociological look at how society has changed and how Starfleet reflects society. But I also think this also comes at why some people sometimes have difficulty with modern Trek, even though I agree that modern Trek is reflecting modern society as it should.
Right.
Because that's kind of the point, but it means that it's different. But that's because society is different. It's not the 80s anymore. It's not the 60s anymore. It's worth reading on The Bulwark. There we go. That's my bit of the week. All
right. Mine is Virtual TrekCon 5, which happened mostly last week and weekend. But it's all available on YouTube, and they still have on their website, they have the full schedule, and from there you can click to each YouTube video. But they put together such a spectacular event. There were so many people. I mean, they had individual panels, a great one with Dayton Ward, I have to say, like getting into detail of what his job is, consulting on all the shows, as well as the book that's coming out. They had like the Delta Flyers talking to Peter Holmstrom and Lisa Klink. They had Robin Curtis, Nana Visitor, all kinds of stuff. They premiered Walter Koenig's reviews of Star Trek original series. And then they had this amazing, they did an award show, they called it the Lappy Awards, like Live Long and Prosper. And the people they had to come on and either present or accept awards, it was such a great mix of people. Like you have Doug Drexler presenting a Lifetime Achievement Award to Michael Westmore. And there was Sheldon Collins, who played the kid in A Piece of the Action, showed up. And Adam Nimoy telling stories about Leonard showing the first picture of him in his Spock makeup and his pride in being in so much of the franchise. And J.G. Hertzler shows up, and he was just great. Like Dan Curry, Aaron Waltke got a special award, as did Kitty Swink, Todd Stashwick. They booked so many different people from all walks of life to do different things. And the whole mood of it, there was always a live chat going, filled with people having fun. It's quite the event. So we'll put up a link to it so you can go back and find all the videos. I haven't even made my way through all of them yet.
I've watched a couple. It's a great event. There's a lot of love there across the board. The Seventh Rule people, Virtual TrekCon people, it's the same people.
Yeah.
Are really great folks, and
they create such a sense of community as they're booking all, like they book amazing people, and then they create this whole thing going on the side at the same time. It's great.
So that's it for another episode of the All Access Star Trek podcast. We've got a few more episodes to go before we start reviewing Discovery stuff. So stick with us. We'll be back soon.
See you next time.